Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 125 of the Podcana podcast. This week, we're going to be discussing the DLC Milwaukee expected metagame. I have the wonderful Zach Bivens and Thiago joining me on this episode. And I'm super hyped for Milwaukee. I know you guys made it over to Bologna previously. So now, I'm going to be flying over to your guys' turf. Tell me, guys, before we get into it, are you guys hyped? Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, all of these tournaments are always super exciting. A little bit nervous before. I don't feel as good going into Milwaukee as I have for like some of the other tournaments. But you never know what's going to happen, and so it's always fun to reconnect with everybody. And always, these games matter so much, so it's always fun playing them. You feel all these different emotions that you don't when you're just like playing a normal tournament. So yeah, super excited.
Of course, I'm excited. DLC, all that, always exciting. I certainly feel less confident for Italy and for this than I had at any point of last season. I think it's just the nature of the format we got going on right now. So, yeah, there's that, but excited for the DLC, excited to reconnect with the community. Always an amazing time doing that.
Awesome, hell yeah. Okay, let's get straight into talking about this expected metagame. Before we jump into it, I do want to talk about an upcoming event happening this December. So PPG, they hosted the Denver CCQ, the first CCQ within North America. They also have this awesome event happening on December 12th to 14th in Orlando, Florida. Not only for Lorcana, but for many different card games, as you guys can see on the screen. But if you are interested in Lorcana specifically, on the Friday, December 12th, they have a 5K. It is notable that this is actually only pricing in booster boxes. On the Saturday, it's a 10K, but that is cash prizing. So big event coming up there on December 13th. And then they also have another 5K happening on the Sunday, and that's going to be an Infinity constructed event. So this is going to be taking place within the set 10 meta. So Infinity, I think, will be a lot more interesting. Core constructed will be a lot more interesting. PPG previously did the NA last year. They did a fantastic job, in my opinion. I attended one of them. I thought it was great. So huge shout out to them for deciding to partner with us to kind of promote this upcoming event. Another biggest question folks will have is this going to be a CCQ? At the moment, it has not been confirmed, so I don't know if that's going to be updated over time. But I'm super excited to be able to talk about these events. If you guys are interested in purchasing tickets, be sure to click on our affiliate link down below in the video description. It helps out the channel quite a bit. And I'd like to pass this to you, Zach, because this is kind of down your neck of the woods, if I believe, right?
So, Florida, I'm like 8 hours from Florida. So, not so much,
Oh,
but
not so much. Never mind.
yeah, not so much. But they've run a ton of big tournaments there before. Yeah, there's a lot in Miami. I assume there's been some in Orlando too. So I'm sure they'll do a good job. PPG always does great.
So taking a look at the expected metagame again, this is a tier list. We're going to talk through this tier list, and we'll talk about it initially. We'll talk through all of the different decks, and then we're going to revisit it at the end again. But this is kind of made up of what the breakdown was, the deck breakdown from kind of Bologna and what people expected it to be around then. So we had Blurple at the top, and then Amber Steel, Green, Blue, Purple Steel. We had Dogs have a great showing at DLC Bologna, and then Emerald Steel did quite well also as kind of this extra aggressive deck. And then of course we saw Justice's Green Purple float into day 2 as well. So Thiago, I want to pass it to you and just tell me your thoughts on what you would expect going into DLC Milwaukee, post Bologna, what are people feeling, looking at kind of the conversion rates and stuff, which we'll also get into after looking at this tier list as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this meta, we've sort of seen this like top tier solidified throughout the entire season. We've seen very little like delineation from these top decks. They've made up an unbelievably high amount of the meta share every single week. Different from like how we've seen metas before, where there have kind of been some decks along the outside that have been always taking up little bits and pieces of the meta. In this format, it's really been solidified the entire time. The biggest deck that has entered into the fray has been the Green Yellow Dogs deck, and so I think that it's a deck that's going to be continue to do super well. I think it has a really nice matchup spread into some of the top decks, and a lot of people have been working on it. A lot of the top players seem to really enjoy it. It's definitely a really tricky deck to play, so now that it's kind of been proven to be one of the strong decks in the meta, people have kind of gotten some time to practice with it. So I think we're definitely going to see some more of that. I would put it easily with these other top 4 decks. But other than that, it's just going to be more of the same. Like these decks have made up like well over 90% of all of the tournaments in this meta. So I think we're just going to be seeing some more of the same.
Mm-hmm. And Zach, any thoughts on specifically the dogs deck? Because I know this is a deck that you brought to
Yeah.
Bologna, right?
So I agree with a lot of what he was saying. Yeah, I played the deck, played it a lot. I would I would say it's the fifth deck. I wouldn't put it necessarily with the others. I think it's in the perfect spot there. And just my experience with it, like I don't know. I didn't enjoy playing it. It's not my play style. It felt like the games are just out of your hands. Like they can interact with your stuff and you can't really do much to them. And I don't know. I think it's a good deck, but not something that I'm really looking to bring again personally.
Sure, yeah. I think overall we're going to see a lot of what we saw in Bologna. I don't think things are going to change too much. I would be very surprised if Blurple still wasn't the most represented deck. I think we're probably going to see a rise in Purple Steel. I think people were surprised of, I guess, how well it can, like how much of a fight it can actually put up against the Blurple decks. But that's not to take away from the fact that it's still in no way favored into Blurple. I think that's what some people, we saw so many of those matchups happening at DLC Bologna, and I think in the booth we have to like keep reiterating, like, it's clear that this deck, has some fuel, has some gas against these Blurple decks, but they have a specific game plan that they have to execute against it, and the longer the game goes on, the more likely you are to lose, and that's just kind of how that matchup goes. So yeah, Thiago, you were very, very kind to crunch some numbers and kind of get the deck breakdowns here for us with at least the percentages. So taking a look at the day one, is there any data you think will drastically change moving into Milwaukee compared to Bologna from this?
Yeah, I actually think there will be a couple things. I think it's kind of unlikely that Blurple's going to be able to remain this high. Even though it did win the tournament, I think it's still going to be an unbelievably high share of the meta, but I think it's going to be closer to like the 31, 32, maybe all the way down to like the 28, 29 range. I think like it would still be more popular than any deck that had been played in last season's DLC. I just don't think it's going to be quite as popular as it was in Bologna, because I don't think there's any way for it to be. I also think we're going to be seeing a bit of an uptick in Purple Steel, just because a lot of people in the US really love it, and I think it kind of overperformed, putting I think it was 8 copies into the top 32, so it was a quarter of the top 32 when it was just 15% of the field, as well as putting 3 copies into top 8, the only deck to be able to do so. And I also think that Dogs is also going to see an uptick. I think it's a deck that was a little under the radar during Bologna, and people didn't really have enough time to swap to it. And I think a lot more people are going to try to counter Blurple, considering it was such a big share of the meta in Bologna. So I think a lot of people are going to be looking towards Dogs, and that might eat a little bit at the Amber Steel player base. I would imagine there's like at least a little bit of overlap with the people who kind of want to play Dogs and who played Amber Steel. So maybe we'll see a slight drop in Amber Steel. Green Blue, I think, will remain somewhat similar. There's just some people like it and some don't, and the people who like it are not like there's not really any other decks in this meta for them to enjoy it. So I think Blue Green will stay somewhat similar, maybe a little bit down on Amber Steel, a little bit down on Blurple, but it'll still be by far and away the most played deck, and then a little bit of an uptick on Purple Steel and Dogs.
Yeah, I think I would imagine that Green Blue is going to see a bit of a downward spiral as well, because I feel like more people will be more inclined to play Amethyst Steel. It just is kind of curves out, does its thing. It's quite consistent, whereas Green Blue is, like you said, it's for a certain type of player. I think maybe more players will lean towards a deck like Amethyst Steel in general. But I think, yeah, the game plan is still, if you just want to build a deck to try and target Blurple, I could still see a lot of people bringing in a deck like Dogs, right? They saw the conversion rate was good. If they hit a lot of Blurple matchups during the day, they could still have a pretty strong run. Zach, is there any like rogue decks you think might like people might bring? Like, we saw like the green purple. I saw some blue steels, at least in Bologna, going like doing pretty decently in the day one. Kind of, I saw a few of them like 5-0 at one stage, and a couple definitely made day two. But do you think, as Thiago was saying earlier, maybe the meta share is kind of set and you have to work really hard to try and crack it?
So I agree with a lot of what he was saying. Blurple it was actually shocking. Like we knew Blurple had been 40% of the meta so far in the format, but it was still shocking to see 37% when last season we never even had a deck hit 30%. So it was still a little bit jarring there. I think it comes down a little bit, and the reason it comes down a little bit is because stuff like Purple Steel is going to rise up. It's like I've felt that since we left Bologna, that Purple Steel is rising up, and all the pro players are trending towards Purple Steel. So like I think that deck definitely jumps. The dogs, it probably does jump a little bit, but it's really bad into Purple Steel, and I don't know. I don't think a lot of people enjoy the playstyle. I know I sure didn't. Like I told you before we recorded, I would rather not go than play dogs again. It just was so unenjoyable to play because it was just the games were so out of my hands. And while the deck is difficult to play, like it still just felt out of my hands. So yeah, I think it'll rise a little bit, but I'm not sure how much. And the problem with all these rogue decks is they're all terrible into blue purple. Like I wouldn't, even on our previous slide, I definitely wouldn't even have green still in the A tier because it doesn't matter how you build it. 4 Chromicon, anything, I don't care. You're not good against Blurple. So, and I think that's a trend with every single rogue deck. You can either build to beat Blurple or you can build to beat everything else, but you can't do both.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's super, super fair. We're going to take a quick look at the day 2 breakdown again and some of the kind of conversion rates for these decks. So, as we mentioned, yeah, we know Amber Emerald converted quite well, and then the Amethyst Emerald, a couple of them made it through and stuff, but overall, there was nothing too crazy from this. We looked over this, I believe, the episode after Bologna anyways, where we looked through like the percentages a little bit deeper and stuff, but yeah, like I would expect something quite similar. I would expect Purple Steel, a lot of them to kind of make day 2 in total. It's just like super, super, super consistent deck. For me, I'm really curious just where people are kind of going to land on Emerald Sapphire in general, because like I said, it's for a very particular type of player, but I think there's still plenty of them that can make day 2 and that can have pretty good game into Blurple, at least if that's a lot of the meta share, and then you can build your deck in a certain way to try and help out against Purple Steel, as we'll talk about in a little bit. And Thiago might reminisce, get some PTSD against a specific deck. But yeah, let's jump straight into it, and we are going to take a look at a Blurple list. I didn't want to just put the winning deck from Bologna again, because I feel like people have probably seen it everywhere at this stage. I want to just talk about like some different Blurple builds and say like some cards that we could try, some cards that other people are considering. And Thiago, I want to draw your eye to something that you've probably already seen in this list, and you say 3 Genie. What is this madman doing? So how do you feel about that in Blurple specifically?
I don't think it's ideal. I think a lot of the Blurple hands, if you don't play Genie on turn 3, your hand economy becomes quite poor, and it's really difficult to ink every single turn that you need to and be able to curve out and play these gigantic cards every single turn ahead of schedule. So I think in terms of that, I would rather just find the uninkable space anywhere else, but it is something that I've considered in the past. Like in the first tournament of this set, Kendall played 3 Genies in his Blurple deck, which, we had talked about leading up to that event, and, I thought it was fine to play, but kind of as more and more games of Blurple have been played throughout this format, I think it ends up being really important to have that extra card. I did play against this player, Boba, in the Swiss, and I was able to beat him as Purple Steel against Blurple, which is obviously not a great matchup. I think a lot of that had to do with the 4-drops that he chose to include. I think the Rider and Kita, instead of what would typically be Iago and Madame Elephant, make it so much easier for the Purple Steel. And I think the Rider, while it's more consistent than Iago, I think at least as a Purple Steel player, when I see a Rider come down, I'm over the moon. And this Kita, when I'm playing cards like Captain Hook and Calhoun in my deck, it really simplifies my game plan quite a bit. So I think if you're expecting to see a lot more Purple Steel, like many of the NA players are, then I think maybe a more traditional list is kind of somewhere you would rather be.
Yep, I think that makes a lot of sense. The 3 Genies is quite interesting. I would argue more so in something like Purple Steel. I've heard some people talk about it where It's never great to have a lot of genies and kind of docks together, right? You kind of have to go for one or the other. So it was a little bit strange for me to see that within this Blurple deck, but it's kind of something I've seen a lot of French players do. But I do want to give a shout out to Boba for making it so far in the tournament. I was saying to Zach before the episode, he actually attended like the European content creator set champ, so I believe he's more of a content creator, but also just a very good player, and clearly had a fantastic run. So for me, I think that's really cool when you see somebody that like makes content and stuff and goes to a big tournament and ultimately performs really well.
Yeah, I know he does the like French language rebroadcasting for a lot of the NA tournaments. So I think he did like the SSG tournament at the start of the season and the
Awesome.
CCS tournament,
Mm.
and I think he's like getting more viewers on his rebroadcast than the English stream was getting. So I mean, the community over there in France is awesome, and he's a big part of it. So yeah, major congrats to him for making top 16.
For sure. Zach, would you mind talking to me a little bit about this Kita? Because we talked before the
Sure.
podcast, and you were kind of telling me like this card can have a major impact in decks and more than people might realize at times.
So I was just mentioning how I actually lost a game in Bologna because of Kita that I easily would have won otherwise, but it let him Hades a turn sooner and get rid of my Stevikov Tramp so I could Under the Sea. So yeah, it's good in certain matchups, but man, is it bad against Steel. When you're trading your 4-drop for a 1-drop Captain Hook, that just feels miserable. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think I could go towards it, but a lot of good players are. Like Artivax is playing Kita. I think Moyen was at one point.
Yep.
So yeah, I can see the benefits for sure.
Yeah, I believe Moyen did include it within his Blurple deck. And I know Moyen also played They Never Come Back, which is like the 3 cost. You kind of freeze two cards. He played that in the matchup against Zan, and I feel like that kind of helped him a little bit against a deck like Dogs. Was able to slow them down a little bit, but sometimes that deck just keeps going, like getting so much value, keep putting on the pressure that, ultimately then it kind of comes down to, okay, how many else's am I getting? How much freezing can I do while I'm also trying to progress my own like win condition and just quest to win the game ultimately. So yeah, I think the only other thing I want to talk about for Blurple in general is the inclusion of this like 5-cost Ursula, the voice stealer. Thiago, I know you've kind of talked about it previously as like just an extra Elsa, and how do you feel about people like? Do you think a lot of people are gonna sway towards kind of probably the winning deck from Bologna, right? That kind of has the voice stealer and a couple of interesting one-ofs. Like, as a purple steel player, how do you feel about that card?
Yeah, I think the card is definitely strongest specifically in the purple steel matchup just because those exerting effects on your 5-ink turn are so important. I think it's less good in other matchups. I think a lot of the times you end up needing the Into the Unknown to activate it, to use with its activation because you're just not that efficient at taking down their exerted characters some of the times. And I think the card is like fine. I think if you're expecting to see a lot of purple steel, it gets way better. I think it's one of these cards that it really is like the 59th and 60th card in your deck. So it's, in my opinion, completely defensible to either play it or not play it. I don't have any super strong opinions other than I hope you don't play it against me.
Sure. All right, moving on. We have Sky's Amber Steel list, where unfortunately Sky was not able to make this episode, but we will be sure to get him on after Milwaukee. Maybe he just wins Milwaukee. We'll same way he just casually rocked up and took Denver down. But Zach, I'd like you to speak a little bit about this deck list, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. Sky spoke. It was funny. We did like this massive long like card review, myself and Sky, and then for like the last 20 minutes, he kind of just like riffed it off. Like, yeah, this is my Amber Steel deck. This is why I'm playing Lilos. This is why I'm doing this. How do you feel this deck is, positioned coming into an event like DLC Milwaukee?
I think it's very well positioned. It's quite good against Blurple. It's not even that bad against Purple Steel, honestly. Like, they have to draw their 1 of or 2 of Madam M Skater to like really be in a good spot. So like it really doesn't have bad matchups. Even the Dogs matchup, which is probably the worst because of Under the Sea, like you can still win it for sure. Draw the pizza at the right time. And I feel like the list you definitely see some variations, but I feel like it's mostly solved. Like I think the Lilo was a good addition because it's like a free card at the end of the game. It really helps there. So Yeah, I don't think there's a lot to talk about so much as far as list. It's pretty soft, and I think it's very well positioned.
Yep, I agree.
I would say that, in my opinion, it's going to be like a bit underrepresented due uh in proportion to how strong it is. I think it's like certainly one of the best decks, and I don't think it's going to be like a super high amount of the meta share. I think it'll be under 20%, even though I think it's super strong. The new the newest like patch of the online stats have come out, and for Amber Steel, it says it's 62% against Blurple, 50% in the mirror, 50% against green blue, 49% against purple steel, and 48% against dogs. So like if you give any credence to those stats, then in my opinion, it's completely indefensible to not play Amber Steel. It's
Hmm.
just like not everybody gives that much, puts that much weight into the stats. But if you do believe them, then they say like you should absolutely under no circumstances submit any other deck list. So it'll be interesting to see. I think, of course, you have a lot of game into the purple steel matchup, but if you're playing against it like 6 rounds in the tournament, then you're like you would much rather have submitted something else. But the deck is super solid. You have a very, very flat matchup spread, and you're like good into the best deck in the game. So I think a lot of people have figured out ways to play into like the trickier matchups, and so yeah, I think people who are good at the deck will do well, and I think it might be like one of the surprises in the tournaments, like as a deck that ends up overperforming the amount of people who bring it.
Yep, I agree. Speaking about like slight variations, there is another deck I want to showcase here. This is a build from my teammate Bennett. Quite similar. It's like one less Lilo. It has the extra pennies. It's on Lawrence instead. I think that's like a big difference. Well, another big difference actually also is Calhoun. So I know there was another player that performed quite well in Bologna, Zenon. He got like I believe it was top 16 in European Championships last year. And he kind of decided that I want to try play like Calhoun in my Amber Steel deck. And ultimately, yeah, it's performed pretty well. Calhoun's like a solid card. The same way it performs really well within Purple Steel. But the thing is, it's like I know at least his build was close to something like 22 uninkables, which is quite a lot. But it's like I don't know, like all of these Amber Steel decks have quite a lot of uninkables at a stage, and then maybe you want to play it where, you know, whatever number you feel is fine for yourself, you'll do. So I think if you can fit Calhoun into the deck, it's also not like terrible. I think it does kind of work into the shell. I think it's just difficult for a lot of people because you play 4 Nalas and you play 4 Docks. Like this is 10 2 cost uninkable cards. Um, so I think that's a little bit tricky. Would love to hear your thoughts, Tiago, on just Calhoun within Amber Steel in general.
Yeah, so basically the difference between this and Sky's list is that this one cuts the Troubadour entirely, right? So then it's
Right, right.
relying on cards like Lawrence and Calhoun who
Yes,
have like attack power. Whereas when you look at Sky's list, pretty much every card in the deck has like 1 or 0 strength. So you're really not like trying to challenge on the board. Whereas a deck like this, when you pair it with like the Peets and the Mulans and the Shift Rhinos, like you actually have like that kind of access available to you. But I do think that overall the Troubadour ends up being the most consistent like card for your on the draw game plan because like you don't really want any of this when you're going first, and like so the Troubadour is like specifically like against decks while you're going second, and like particularly in the steel matchups. So it's like a bit specific, but I think overall with how much these matchups depend on Singing Strength of Raging Fire and getting initiative in that sense. I think that's what I prefer Sky's list than these more challenge heavy lists, but I know a lot of people like the consistency that just having a body with stats provides you.
for sure. Yep. Moving into green blue, Tiago. I believe you're familiar with this list. Am I right? Yep.
Yeah, this was in fact the list that took me out. I am getting a little bit of PTSD looking at this, but I think it's super solid list. I think if you want to play green blue and you're expecting a lot of purple steel, this is definitely a good direction to go. I think this player has now transitioned into playing Ink Geyser in his current lists, so I'm not sure I'm as
Wow.
on board with that, but I think it's definitely a super solid starting off point for anybody looking to play blue-green. I know you've been preparing a lot of blue-green going into Milwaukee, so what are your thoughts on this list? Where's your head at in general with the archetype, and kind of how are you feeling going into Milwaukee?
Yeah, so I've been playing this list the most probably. Just jamming this a bunch, and I've been surprised at the 4 stop chaos in its tracks. It's been pretty good, honestly. Like 4 is maybe a little bit unnecessary. Like I think you can run like 3 or 2, but for the cards that I'd put in place for it, it's like I don't know. Like there's no Donalds in this list, and Donald's always been like that 5 drop. That's like fine. I think like a couple of Donalds could be okay within this list to like try get to your Hades a bit faster or your Clarabelle if you don't have like your shift line or you kind of miss your good opener. But overall, yeah, I've like really, really, really been liking this list, and I think if you're expecting an uptick in purple steel, this is probably a super solid green blue list for you to try out. Also against amber steel, the 4 stop chaos, they just kind of act as temporary under the seas, and sometimes just bouncing 2 of this is all you need. Sometimes bouncing the cards back to your opponent's hand and then just like combining it with a bend as we've seen already is like super super efficient. That can kind of end the game on the spot. So yeah, overall I've been really impressed, although I think it's probably a little bit too late for me to really experiment with it now, but I've still just really not liked this Shift Baymax in general as a card. I think it's like so necessary that I need it as the opener, but I want to see if I can try out the Shift Basil lines instead a little bit, because it's just a few less uninks. The difference between the 5 strength versus the 4 strength doesn't actually matter that much, so it's all the only difference is am I actually hitting the shift or not. I kind of like Basil in general a little bit more than the Bobby. The Bobby's been fine to filter and try find some of your combo pieces, but most of the time I don't want to discard any of my cards. All of my cards are kind of good, so I think Basil as a solid 1-drop that can actually, like, the important thing to remember is if you're against Amber Steel, like Basil can just trade into an exerted Aurora. It can just take out. It can actually threaten whatever other 1-drop your opponent has. Whereas if you're playing Clarabelle and you're playing Bobby, you just can't do that, right? You kind of have to accept that they're literally going to have like their 1, 2, 3 and kind of do their thing. And in that sense, everybody matters if you're against something like Amber Steel or if you're against something like Purple Steel, because it ups your their strength numbers and stuff. So I'm not saying yes, your Basil will be able to take out the Aurora because maybe you'll have the shift line anyways. But that is something I want to experiment with a little bit more. I think I'd still play a couple of Stop Chaos in its tracks in the deck. I think if I play the 6-cost Basil, I'd probably play a couple of 5-cost Donalds at least, because there's some nice synergy there with that card. But that's kind of the direction that I'm at right now. I feel like this is a super, super, super solid list. Personally, I might cut 1 or 2 of the Stop Chaos to put something else in, but honestly, if I'm leaving this list as is, I don't really know what else I'm putting in place for it anyways. Like maybe honestly a couple more develops just to try and find my combo pieces a little bit earlier, because it's or a little bit easier because there's only 2 on this list. But I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts of just blue-green in general. Like I remember in Bologna, I kind of had this feeling that I didn't think it was capable of winning a DLC. I remember saying this to somebody. I was like, I don't know if this deck's good, but I don't know if it has the consistency that all of these other decks have to ultimately take down a DLC. So would be curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Maybe I'll start with you, Zach, because this plays, at least in my opinion, so similar to like the Amber Emerald discard deck in terms of you're not doing a lot of the discard stuff, but you're trying to set up for this combo, wipe the board, and then kind of carry out your game plan. So what are your thoughts on this deck in general?
Yeah, so consistency is absolutely the problem. Like when it hits the pieces, it can't lose. Like
Yep.
Clarabelle, shift Clarabelle, you're welcome. Is game over. But yeah, it beats itself. And so one thing that I think is really interesting that I was telling you before we hit record is that every single green-blue player I play against, or that I talk to, thinks that they're heavily favored into Blurple. And then every single Blurple player I play against or talk to thinks that they're heavily favored into green-blue. It's like, which one is it? Like, everybody thinks that. So it's just crazy. As far as the deck list, yeah, 4 Stop Chaos is probably a little much, but I do like it being in the deck. And I know you talked about upping the developer brain, but I actually kind of hate that card. Like,
Interesting.
I don't. Yeah, so if you like run the math, it adds like 1% to your ramp odds, so that's not a reason to play it. And like, I don't know. It makes more sense in a deck like this where you have to have certain cards, but like in general, it's just not a card I'm a fan of. So yeah.
Sure. Speaking
Yeah,
of
it's funny
stats,
how
Tiago, do you know off the top of your head if you're saying like what you at least expect the Blurple versus Green Blue win percentages on average? It's probably, you're going to say 50-50, right? It's probably
yeah,
50-50.
it's extreme. I think it's within a percent of 50-50.
Yeah.
I think it kind of depends on the lists. Like if the Blurple players playing like four Monstros and like things like that, like then they can be the 51%er in the matchup. So I think like whatever the random like 57th to 60th card in each deck like is text for, it like makes it slightly better. If the blue-green player's playing 0 copies of Bend, that obviously is a bit detrimental. If they're playing a lot of copies of Baymax, it's like a bit worse for them. So I think it is extremely close to even, and I think it's like very dependent on like the last couple slots in the deck. I think it's funny though that you say the thing about the green, blue, and Blurple players because it's the opposite for the purple, steel, and green, blue players. Both of them just keep saying that they're unfavored in the matchup, and so in the most recent thing of stats that have come out, it says blue green is 53% and PS is 47%, which is
Interesting.
kind of against the general consensus of what the matchup is. But like I've always thought that it was like extremely even and like they just do so much more powerful things than you that you're like you're very capable of losing. And yeah, all the green blue players are like it's my worst matchup, and all the purple steel players are like I don't really want to pair into green blue.
It's also how I feel against Amber Steel. I'm like, I need to hit my combo piece to survive against Amber Steel. If I don't, I just lose. And then all the Amber Steel players are like, oh, well, they'll just under the see me and I'll just lose. It's like, it's so weird. This meta is so weird how this is how people think. It's like, nope, nobody's confident. That's why I was joking with Zach earlier. I was like, yeah, I guess you both feel a bit like, oh, I don't feel great in this matchup. Whoever wins the dice roll. Man, I'm feeling great right now. I think I'm going to win this game. So it's just kind of how the meta is right now. But yeah, that's my thoughts on green blue. But moving into your deck, Tiago, purple steel. This is the build that you brought to Bologna. How did you feel bringing that build within that meta? And I guess how would you adapt if you expect purple steel to potentially be on the rise? Are there any cards you would specifically play for the mirror, or do you think you want to just keep your deck as good as it can be against the wider metagame?
Yeah, I think you definitely have to consider the mirror more than you did. This top 32 list I think was like completely good. I think I was pretty happy into most of the decks in the top 32 and felt somewhat confident in being able to run the bracket, even though it didn't end up happening. I think this list is like 5 cards off of the one of the lists that top forward, which so like it was successful in that sense. I think my list is somewhat worse in the mirror because I don't play all of the evasive on your turn characters. I think those characters are generally quite poor against the field and are very mediocre against Blurple, but they really shine in the mirror. I'd be looking to like a lot of the adjustments that I would want to make in this kind of list would like be trimming on the bells and like maybe going into some of the 3-cost Tinkerbell evasive to try to shore up your matchup against Blurple, at least when you're going first. But I think a lot of those changes make you like way, way, way worse into the mirror. I think Bell is like a card that is spectacular in the mirror and is also very mediocre in all the other matchups. So I'm a little bit in a bind with kind of the direction that I want to go with Purple Steel moving into Milwaukee, but I would probably play something within like 57 cards of this. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Zach, is this a deck that you would potentially be interested in? I think, people, we have to remind folks watching, Purple Steel is kind of your baby as well, right? Before Thiago came on
Yeah.
this team,
Forget this Thiago
yeah,
guy.
exactly. I remember this was your baby, man.
I played Purple Steel literally at the first DLC when everyone thought it was horrible
I
and
also played it in
was
the
like,
first DLC, man. I also played it. Yep.
you did, you
Yep.
did. Yeah, so Purple Steel has been my favorite deck since the beginning of the game. Love it so much. Love the play style. I definitely love Rabbit so much more than Doc. I love playing the grindy games where you're just building up your hand across the game and fighting for board position and taking good trades and stuff. So Purple Steel is not what it used to be to me, but obviously it still would be my favorite deck to play for sure. I like the more illusion based approach, like with the Raja and stuff. Just the 3 health matters a lot. And even if they improvise or whatever, you're really not that been out of shape. Like who cares? Um, So like you're not even really getting that punished. So this would definitely be like more towards what I would lean towards. If you were paying attention to me in the beginning of this format, I was playing the evasive stuff on our turn, but I think purple still, like the mirror match, made up a much bigger share of the meta back then than it has recently. So this would be more what I'm going towards. I would absolutely stay super far away from that Tinkerbell that he just mentioned. I'm the evasive Tinkerbell. I think that card's terrible in this meta. So I wouldn't be doing that.
Thiago's trying to sabotage everyone's decks just to make his decks better, bro. Everyone play these cards, and I'll rock up, and I'll be chilling, you know. I think it's a good point that you guys make though about these evasive cards on your turn. Like it's something I remember even casting the Inking tournament where we had a purple steel. It was a purple steel mirror match. And somebody had the evasive cards on your turn, and somebody didn't. I was like, these cards make all the they literally make all the difference because one player is left with like 2 genies on the board. It's like, how do you ever deal with that if you don't specifically have these types of cards? You don't have enough strengths and different cards like that, right? Or if you're not doing specific genie into Elsa into Belle stuff to kind of clean off their evasives. I know a card that you don't have, Thiago, which I'm curious on because we did see it in the finals is Happy, right? Again, that is one of these cards that's evasive on your turn. How do you feel about Happy compared to kind of the 2-cost cards that are evasive on your turn?
Yeah, so when we're talking about the evasive on our turn cards, I'll clarify we're talking specifically about Happy and then the 2-cost Jafar and Smee.
Yes.
Those are mostly what we're in the place of Palace Guard and Raja.
Yep.
So first off, I'll also say that in tournaments, I'm 9-0 in tournament matches against Purple Steel, including in multiple top cuts and in grand finals and they've always had these cards. So like even though it's like better to have them in the mirror, you can absolutely win without them.
Sure.
I think Happy is significantly better than the 2-cost ones because just the way that the breakpoints work in the Blurple matchup, 2 attack and 3 attack is like functionally the same because like when they're on the play, they're able to exert your 3-cost. You play 3-cost on turn 3, they play Elsa on turn 4. They exert your 3-cost, they put 3 damage into their Elsa, so then the Happy cleans it up. When genies bump into each other, then the Happy cleans it up. And the 3 attack like only matters like on turn 50 if no players have any cards in hand and they play a Dumbo, then you have the 3/2 like and you don't have any other. Like it's only on like wilds, like not core play lines to the matchup. I think Happy is good in the sense that this meta has now introduced a lot of these really impactful 1-drops like Aurora and Pluto, where you kind of need to check them immediately, and Palace Guard does not do that successfully. But I think that these illusions like are better when you have more copies of them because your opponent is going to have 4 copies of Hypnotic Strength in their deck, and so it doesn't really matter if you're playing 4 Giant Cobras or 11 illusions, then the 4 copies of Hypnotic Strength are like going to be stretched thin. So, and again, the only like really, really brutal one is if they're like playing improvise on your characters, because then it's like really efficient. But even if they're spending 2 ink to kill these cards, or if they're playing Fire the Cannons on your Raj and you're like trading down one ink, it's not really that devastating. And a card like Raj just completely takes over the early game against the aggressive yellow decks, whereas the 2 health 2-drops are complete liabilities. So I've not been a huge fan of those cards. I think Happy's okay. It's definitely defensible to play. I've been playing around with it a little bit, but I think overall you're better served just playing a more unfair game with these overstated cards.
Sure. Yep. Super great conversations around Purple Steel. I think that's going to be super useful to folks going into Milwaukee, trying to make that decision if they want to mess around with these cards or not. So moving into the Dogs deck, myself and Zach were looking through the lists, and what I said to him was, some of these decks that finish in the top 8 were running such strange cards, in my opinion, and it was hard for me to find like what is the standard build of yellow-green Dogs, and it's really difficult to find that. There's so many different variations, so many different options. For example, even this deck, right? Like this deck doesn't have a key card that you just mentioned, Thiago, which I think is actually quite good within Dogs right now, which is that Pluto, right? That 1-cost Pluto that basically lets you potentially cheat out a 7-cost Tramp even earlier. So not all of these decks are opting to kind of go that direction. From what I've seen, I've been more impressed with the Pluto in general. But yeah, Zach, I'd love to kind of hear your overview, I guess we can take this as an example of kind of a core green yellow dogs build, and what are the different directions you can kind of take this, and why would you play certain options over other options in a metagame, I suppose.
Yeah, there's quite a few ways to take it actually. This was like the more standard list that we could find in the top 32 at least. Whereas the other ones were playing Tianas and stuff like that, which also makes sense because like you're not really. This is a deck where you're just building up your board and not exerting until turn 4, which is like perfect for Tiana. So that plays perfectly too. Um, I like the Uninkables is a huge problem with this deck. The one drop ones don't matter at all because you're just playing them out. But when you're playing multiples of Chromicon and Under the Sea and the 5-cost Lady, like that really pricks you up. I lost one of my matches because game 3, my hand was double 5-cost Lady, triple Chromicon, and like double Ursula and some other random nonsense. Like I didn't even have a 1-drop. So like the high cost on Inkables just really mess with this deck. And for that reason, there's like no shot I would be playing 4 or 5-cost ladies. It's just a huge mess. I would want to play 3 Under the Seas because like you have to have it to beat Amber Still and the mirror match. So like, yeah, there's a lot of different directions you can take, and I think the high cost on Inkables is what kind of throws the wrench into any direction you go.
Yeah, it's a good point you make about the Tiana, because from the games that I casted and stuff, I saw it being pretty effective. But then also, that still just adds to the uninkable problem. I think if you're not specifically able to get that Tiana out as early as you can, it can be quite tricky. But ultimately, I do like the fact that you can not only you can use the Pluto, but if some of those decks also, if not only can you use the Aurora, but some of those decks also include the Pluto, which means you can then also get Tiana out on turn 2 potentially. Thiago, how do you feel about green yellow dogs in general versus purple steel? You feel like you're pretty comfortable into the matchup?
Yeah, I think you're definitely super comfortable. You have a lot of these 3 attack characters, which are difficult for them to deal with. I think like as long as you're not playing Genie on turn 4 and like giving them the outs to like play their nut hand into Tramp into Under the Sea, you're like in a pretty good position. I think the big turning point in the matchup is when you play 2 3 attack characters on the same turn. So either on turn 4 when you play double 2-drop, or turn 5 you play 2-drop plus 3-drop. That's really when the game shifts and becomes super difficult for them. You're usually good enough to race their Chromicons. I think this list is by Giogu, who was one of the like pioneers of this archetype. We really saw in between the weeks leading up to Bologna, dogs doing super, super well online, and this was one of the players who was constantly like on top of the online leaderboards with this deck. And so this is sort of the standard that we ended up seeing a lot of players like Zach and Sailor kind of mimicking with a lot of the counts and stuff. I think the Tiana list, I personally find it better now. I think just Tiana fitting in with your game plan that like you just want to sit around with your board until turn 4 and then either cash out by playing a heavily reduced Tramp 7 or questing out with Tiana and protecting your other characters is super strong, because that deck really lives and dies by having the Tramp 7 on turn 4. So if you have like an alternative game plan that's at least somewhat also powerful, then that's a good way to pivot. I also think having like Ursula Deceiver and Tiana in the same deck creates a lot of tension for your opponent, because they're really looking to ink their Strength of Raging Fire into Ursula, because especially if they're on the play, their hand can get really, really taxed very quickly. So they might not have enough ink to start doing these double spell turns to get on the board like they need to. So being able to attack their Strength of Raging Fire in that sense when there's so few answers to Tiana in the current meta. So it's like you're playing against these steel decks and they have 4 Strength of Raging Fires and that's it. Or you're playing against Blurple and they have 4 Into the Unknowns and that's it. And so if they just don't have access to these because you have Ursula Deceiver taking them away, then the Tiana can really, really snowball. So that would probably be the direction that I would take the deck, but plenty of good players like versions without her. So
For sure, yep. Moving on to Green Steel. This is a deck that I'd previously seen before Bologna, but I think it was off a lot of players' radars. I don't think they were so familiar with it. So this is the top 4 version by Bruno. A lot of them are built very, very similarly. Has the 4 Chromicons in here that, yes, are supposed to help out against Blurple, but as I actually ultimately agree with what you said, Zach. I think some of these Green Steel players are so convinced that they're so okay versus Blurple, which just really isn't the case. Yes, Chromacon is a card that helps out against Blurple, but like you still have to race and you still have to win, and like I don't know, like I feel like the Blurple players, like we said, depending on some of their options, can still play around the Chromacon to a certain extent. The interesting thing about this deck, I think, is just how fast it can kind of go in the early game with some of its aggressive cards. Like you've got like the Freds, you've got the Cursed Merfolks, and I do want to briefly switch to the next version of the deck list as well, which is opting to run Pegasus. I think Pegasus is quite an interesting additional 1-drop that can just stick around and gain a nice amount of lore. The further you go into the game, you kind of get that lore in the early game. This again is running Lawrence, it's running the Jafars. It wants to have a little bit more focus on just having these characters with a decent amount of strength as well. So they're going to have that double game plan of being able to challenge into maybe something like the Amber Steel decks or the Dogs decks, but then you also kind of have the gas yourself. This particular build is, I have a title inspired by Illuminator. It's like 1 card different, I believe, from one of his current decks, and this player played against Zan in the CCQ in Sweden, in Stockholm, in the top 16, and I believe he 2-0'd Zan when Zan was on Dogs. So this deck, yeah, probably pretty decent into Dogs, probably pretty decent into Amber Steel. How do you feel like this deck does into Purple Steel, Thiago? Have you tested against this much? Like, again, this is definitely one of the more niche decks, I would say, within the meta currently.
Yeah, I think that this deck is like super dreadful into purple. So I think that's like the main thing holding it back is like a lot of these more aggressive, slanted decks that are kind of in the periphery of the meta, just have such poor matchups into purple steel. It's like we do so many of the same things. They can never get on board because we have cards like Calhoun and Captain Hook, which just keep them in check. Like we race them super well. Their deck is also, they don't have a ton of like 2-questers, so it's not like they can just slam the Chromacon and then make up for it by having like a deck like Amber Steel can go like Daisy Duck, Lady Nala, and then they have so much questing power for such little ink investment. This deck, it's like every questing power that you're developing costs you like at least 1 ink to develop. So I think you can just like never be fast enough to outrace them. It's like they have genies and Elsas, which you can never deal with. I think Purple Steel is like the biggest hurdle for this deck. I think that in Zach's scale of the rogue decks are either they either beat Blurple and nothing else, or beat everything else, but beat some other things and can never beat Blurple. I think like at least this version from Bologna, like I think it's probably more on the it can beat Blurple sometimes, but just never beats anything else scale. Like I think I just can't imagine like a steel deck like struggling into this. I don't know.
The Louis as well, I just feel like against Purple Steel is just like, yeah, I'll just get rid of it with my Captain Hooks, with any of my characters pretty much. I will say I'm pretty scared of this deck as a blue-green player though, with a lot of these,
that makes sense.
with the Prince Phillips, with the Heathcliffs, that they can't be under the seed, with the Lawrence. But then suddenly, okay, these cards just turn sideways once, and then in Purple Steel you just clean them up with any of your characters. With any of the other decks, you're easily able to clean them up. So yeah, it's a heavy ink investment to be playing cards like Prince Philip and Heathcliff. But
yeah, or even these lists that have like these 8 looters, like 4 Bobby and 4 Mulan. It's like they're gonna spend like 8 cards to develop like 8 lore on board, and then they're gonna have like nothing after, and they're like not even gonna be halfway towards winning the game. So like the card quality is just so low that like when you play against these fair decks, these like fair mid-rangey decks, like they just outpace you in every single stage of the game, and like you have to be doing like kind of unfair things with Chromacon to like cheese out the game basically.
Mm-hmm.
I think like the biggest problem is like this is Purple Steel, but without the genies, without the Elsas, without the bell. Like, why would you do this instead? I don't understand. So like you can never beat those cards against Purple Steel. And I like it. This is clearly built to beat Blurple in the best way it can, but I don't even think it's that good at doing that. Like, and then you filled your deck with all these terrible cards, and like now you need something to finish the game, and you draw a Chromacon, your third one. You already have 2 on the board, and like. I don't think Green Steel is very good right now. At least not the versions I've seen.
Yeah, I do find it interesting. I think it's like if you wanted to play Purple Steel, but you cared less about trying to, as you said, maintain some control with cards like Elsa and get some more cards out with Genie and just kind of just be as aggressive as you can be. I think that's the direction maybe you want to lean in, is just like win the game as fast as possible, at least in the early game for it. But yeah, it's interesting. I also don't know how much of an advantage you gain. Like, usually rogue decks like this, it's your opponent not knowing what could be in your deck, you get a big advantage of. But there's nothing in this deck that I think, oh, I'm so surprised this came down. Like, maybe a Louis in a certain situation when you're not expecting it, or I don't know, the Jafars to be able to buff up some of your stuff. But everything else is kind of very standard. So I don't know how much surprise factor you're necessarily getting with running a deck like this.
Yeah, I think it's like somewhat people just not knowing how to play against Chromacon, and then like they
Yeah.
accidentally bump a guy. They're like, okay, so I'm gonna quest with these guys, and then I'm gonna attack with my last guy last. So then you can't bounce one. Oh, you bounced your Dock. Oh no. Or oh, you bounced your Go-Go, and you randomly are gonna gain 6 lore. And so I think that there's like a big element of like just if you pair into 3 opponents who like don't really know what they're doing, and then you get like a couple blurples, and then you always get the Chromacon on 3. Like I can understand how this deck makes a deep run into a tournament, but it's certainly not the most consistent deck. If I were trying to make green steel work, I would probably like revert back to something that is similar to like what LD won the content creator set champs with, that has like a better matchup spread otherwise, and then maybe just try to like work in some chromacons or something to make you like less good against the decks you're good against, but like slightly better matchup into Blurple, so that you can at least have like a somewhat flat matchup spread. That's kind of the direction I would start with. But these decks that have such low card quality, like we're playing Heathcliff and stuff in our decks, like I don't know, this is not the kind of direction that I would want to go into a DLC with.
Yeah, I don't really want to speak about it too much at the moment, but I know there's been a hot topic within the community about like takebacks and stuff, and yeah, this Chromacon, I don't know, you just describing that situation for some reason to me, Thiago, was like, oh, you attack in, I activate my Chromacon, I bounce my Dock. Hang on a second, I'll do something else.
Yeah.
And it just makes me laugh a little bit, because I don't think that we've talked about it that much on the podcast. I know a lot of people have expressed their opinion. I think in general, allowing take-backs at certain level of events is actually very, very good. It, for a lot of the newer players, it's, can teach them some lessons of like how you should do this, how you should do that. But in the higher levels, to some extent, I think it's really important that if you make a certain mistake, you're in a super high-level tournament, you've made that mistake, you'll learn from that mistake, you'll not make that mistake again. So I know it's a hot topic amongst the community at the moment, and for me, I'm not going to lie, it's been a bit of a worry for me as I go into as I go into Milwaukee, of like how much are people going to care about these takebacks? Are they going to be doing it a lot? Am I right to call in this certain situation, or is the judge going to be like, yeah, no, we're going to be very lax about this at this there's honestly, I think I'm not really sure where the line is drawn now with how the community's been talking about it. And I don't know if you guys feel the same, but we don't have to spend too much time kind of talking about it, but it's a bit of a weird one, right? In my opinion, of how well it's defined, at least in my opinion. But again, we don't have to get into it. We can leave the comments to discuss it as well, and maybe if people want to hear us talk about it, we can after Milwaukee. But the last deck I do want to talk about here is Lorcana Justice's Brainiac, as it's named. I do want to give credit to Atlantis Raid. This is a player from the UK that also spent a lot of time cooking up this deck. And this is a deck that apparently was built, again, it's one of these rogue decks that was built to absolutely destroy Blurple, but it has a very poor matchup into most of the other stuff. Specifically green-blue, I think it's a very, very rough matchup. But yeah, I mean, Thiago, like, is it even worth telling people to... I guess it's worth be aware that this deck exists, look at the cards, maybe recognize some of the stuff that they could do, but how much prep people should be putting in against this deck is... I wouldn't say you have to worry about it too much, in my opinion.
Yeah, this deck, like I think if you play like one game into it, like you'll be okay. You just need to remember to use your like fire the cannons and strength of raging fires on their shift targets, and make sure you're not getting blown out by things like their Mother Gothel or Cusco shifts. Just like make sure you have one little meaningless character sitting upright, just ready to tank one of these effects. But basically, in my experience playing against this deck, they'll just like draw a bajillion cards and stop everything you always do, and then manage to like steal defeat from the jaws of victory. You know, like they just like somehow manage to lose every single game when they're in a completely commanding position. Um, and so it just doesn't have the same like ways to finish the game that blue green does, because blue green moves the game into a direction where you're playing like Hades Basil, Clarabelle Clarabelle, Hades Basil, and then it's just like your opponent can never get on board. Whereas these effects like Mother Gothel and Cusco, when you're drawing them a bunch of cards and bouncing a bunch of things to their hand, they can just like redeploy all these cards, and then you're hitting the weakest thing every time. Whereas one of these Hades or Basil effects, they get rid of the strongest thing, and then all of these like other like less impactful cards are what remains on the board. And so I don't think it's like super strong into really anything other than Blurple. Like I think you can certainly win. Like you can get your shift line against Amber Steel and then like kill a bunch of characters with your Cusco shift or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think this deck was like a really good bring for Bologna. A lot of people did well. It surprised a lot of people. It takes a lot of like guts to bring something to like they're not going to have a DLC in Europe until March. So
Yep.
like the players who brought that there, like they had a lot of confidence in it, and I think it's like super cool that like people were able to do that, and then they had enough conviction to bring it and actually do well with it. But I think moving forward, it's not going to have the same surprise factor that I think played a big role in its success in Bologna.
Yep. I think I agree. Zach, do you have any
I
thoughts on it?
think just that the purple steel matchup is so bad with this deck, and I think that's a huge problem. Like I don't see how you're beating that deck, at least with this list. I think a lot of the matchups are really bad. Green blue is doing the same stuff as you, but a turn faster. So like, yeah, green blue and purple still feel not really winnable. So yeah.
Sure, makes sense. Right, that's pretty much it for the decks again. Let's take one final look at the tier list. Thiago, would love to hear your thoughts if you would rearrange anything for. I guess we could say we can put the tier list for expected metagame, right? So maybe you can move like purple steel up a little bit or move some stuff down. That would be at least my first thought would be maybe purple steel will be at least higher than green blue on this list.
Yeah, I think Blurple obviously number one. I think Purple Steel will be number two, about 20%, which is like a huge increase from Bologna. I think Amber Steel will sit between 15 and 20%. And then I think Blue, Green, and Dogs will be at the low double digits. And then after that, I think the only other decks that like will be somewhat represented are gonna be Green Steel, Green Purple, and Blue Steel. I think of those, the one I like the most is Blue Steel. So I think all of those decks will have like, I don't know, maybe like 3 to 5%, something very low. But I think a lot of people are really trying to iterate on Blue Steel, and they're kind of getting somewhere. So I would not be surprised if we see some Blue Steels doing well, especially if we're expecting a rise in Purple Steel. I think Blue Steel can certainly be built to have a very good Purple Steel matchup. So that would be kind of the deck outside of the big five that I think will have a bit of a puncher's chance. But other than that, I think like again, 85% of the meta is going to be these top five decks.
Yep.
I agree with everything. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think green still is not even sniffing A tier, and I think blue still is way better than. Yeah, blue still would be moved up to B, green still down to B. Keep A right where it is, and the rest don't really matter.
Sure. Yeah. The order of them doesn't matter, right? They're all going to be there. They're all going to be represented. Purple Steel will probably see a bit more representation than it previously saw. Yeah, I'm kind of a bit sad I didn't include a Blue Steel list because I have a friend in work in card market who's a big Blue Steel believer, and we talk about it a lot. And I'm impressed by some of the people that are running the deck. I think there's some cool things that you can do with it. So I would like to see Blue Steel be maybe the green steel that it was in Bologna, right? Like I'd like to see Blue Steel perform pretty well. I think it could be quite interesting. But yeah, that's pretty much it in regards to DLC Milwaukee. We'll all be attending, including Sky, so please feel free to come up to us, speak to us, say hello, take a picture. All four of us, I haven't even said this outside the podcast, all four of us have to meet up and get a picture at some stage, of course, right? The new Podcana crew. But yeah, I'm just excited to meet everybody, hang out, have a good time, and yeah, I think it's gonna be a blast. overall? Is there anything like in particular you guys are excited about? Like, is it, as you said, Thiago, you came over to Europe for Bologna, you were memeing saying, qualification easy. Like, are you guys excited to see how some of the Europeans will do with this DLC?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I want to see like all of the people who go to both Milwaukee and Bologna to see how they do. Because the people who are going to be going to, I don't think there's like at least the Americans that went. We kind of expected more people to do a bit better. So I want to know if like there's a big difference between like them when they're in their home countries, like they don't have to deal with all the jet lag and all the
Yeah,
traveling stuff. See if that makes a big difference because a lot of these players did not go to international DLCs last year and stuff like that. So I'd be really interested to see like how that kind of plays an effect. Obviously, I'm really excited to meet everybody. Not super excited about going to like the city of Milwaukee, so I don't know. I'll probably just sit in the Airbnb and like play games. But yeah, I mean, just really excited to see everybody. It's always such a good time.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it then. We do have some cards though we're going to talk about. I believe it's like 10 cards we have prepared. So short tangent. Myself and Tiago spent 2 hours yesterday talking about like 70 plus cards, which it's such a shame that basically there was like audio corruption. I think it was a great discussion. We talked about the potential that all these cards had, but now basically we'll talk about the cards that are probably just the best cards out of all those cards that we discussed. So starting off, we've got the Robot Queen. It's a one-cost inkable steel item. Um, Zach, I would like to hear your initial thoughts. Have you first of all, Zach, have you been keeping up with the spoilers? Are you excited for set 10, or
No.
you're gonna just wait until they all drop
Yes.
together?
Okay. So I'm definitely excited for set 10.
Yep.
I think a lot of people know that I just don't care at all about card reveals, unfortunately. Like I want to focus on the set that I'm in
Sure.
and win those games. So I like to spend my time trying to win the format I'm still in. Whereas I don't really look at card reveals too much until they're all out.
Sure.
Until
sure.
we're ready to play the set. So no, I
This
haven't
guy
really been
is
keeping up
boring.
with it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we gotta change you up, Zach, for the podcast. We gotta get you
I know,
excited
right?
for all of these.
You're an
all of these
influencer
things.
now, Zach. Come on.
Yeah. So I mean, what are your first instincts when you read this card, Zach? This is like true
The
first
Robot
impressions.
Queen.
Yeah.
It is. It actually is.
Yeah.
When you play a character, you may pay 1 ink to banish this and build 2. So I think it's perfectly reasonable card. It's kind of like a delayed Baboom or inkable fire the cannon. So I think it's perfectly fine. We'll certainly see play at some point, probably.
Yep.
Yeah, I think a lot of the reason why Baboom has been played before is like specifically to kill Diablo shifts, which this card does not really do, right? They shift Diablo on 1, and you can't spend 2 ink like when you want to just shoot something for 2. You have to develop it, and then you have to play a character and spend the ink for a character while also playing this. But I think the fact that this has this item tag makes it really, really important because that means you can recur it with something like Tamatoa Happy as a Clam. And so we have not seen like removal spells be something that Tamatoa can recur. So I think that that's going to end up playing a huge role in decks that are looking to do that.
Yep. Then we've got this one-cost Webby Vanderduck with an Emerald, 1/2, the quest for 1. When you play this character, chosen character gets +1 strength this turn. Yeah, we were saying, Tiago, this card basically just goes into like the Dogs deck, right? It's better than the Merryweather. You don't have to pay an extra ink. There's not much more that needs to be said. I do think that there was a card that was released just shortly after we finished talking, Tiago, yesterday. It was like there's like a shift line. With Webby, it's like I think it's like a 4-cost inkable 2/4 that quest for 2 with Ward, shift 2, and I think it's whenever you quest, if your opponent has more ink in their inkwell, then you ink the top card of your deck, which I found quite interesting. But that only works if you're specifically going second and then they're ramping on 2, then it's pretty good. Then it's actually okay. But that was a legendary card, and I'm like, yeah, it's probably a decent legendary card. It's a decent shift on 2, but how often are you getting the effect from it was quite interesting to me. But yeah.
Yeah, I think like we've seen Green Yellow Dogs right now playing Merryweather. I think it's just like important that their deck has a lot of 1 cost so that they can have these lines where they play 5 1 costs on the first 3 turns and get to stay at 2 ink, and then their Tramp 7 costs 2, so then they get to play the Tramp 7 for 2 and stay at 2 ink, and they keep their hand size really big. So all of the cards that they filter through their Tramp 7, they get to keep a lot of good cards. And so this fits way better than Merryweather because It allows you to still have a lot of one drops in your deck list, but also you can play the one cost dual ink 0/3 lady on the first turn, and then you can play a one cost plus this Webby on the second turn, and then buff your lady, and then she is able to quest for 3, whereas Merryweather doesn't do that. So I think just overall it makes more sense than a card like Merryweather, just because you don't have to spend the extra ink. So that deck will want it. Other decks probably not so much, but yeah, if that deck is still played next meta, this card will see play.
Makes sense. All right. Well, we'll talk about Goliath in a second because that card has a lot of things to think about. But we've got David Xanatos, one of Thiago's favorite cards. I think Thiago is going to be a Gargoyles gamer next set. But yeah, so this is a 3-cost inkable steel card. It's a 3/2 that costs for 1. When you play this character, you may choose and discard a card to deal 2 damage to chosen character. I also spoke to somebody in work about this card. You know what the first thing they said to me, Thiago? They said,
What?
"Yeah, this just looks like a Hearthstone card, right? It literally reads.
Yeah.
It reads like a Hearthstone card." Yeah.
Absolutely, it does. I think it's like such a strong effect. I think being able to like develop a body, which in this game even sing songs, while being able to take out their character in a game where like the removal is so overcosted. Like for 3 ink, people were playing Smash in their deck, and so having this instead to like develop a body that's gonna sing, stay on the board so that they're going to have to challenge it. It's going to deal 3 damage back to the guy challenging while taking something out when it comes in that might be their singer. Like if they play a 2 health character that was going to sing their 3-cost song and you play this, like the game is completely swung. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a staple card for a lot of the aggressive steel decks, especially since keeping your hand size low is going to be such a priority with a lot of these Stone by Day effects. And this color already has access to dock, right? So it just fits really nicely with what they're trying to do.
For sure. All right, Zach, I'd like you to read out Goliath if you can.
That's a lot of text.
It's a lot of text.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Goliath reads, Dusk to Dawn. At the end of each player's turn, if they have more than 2 cards in their hand, they choose and discard cards until they have to. And if they have fewer than 2 cards, then they draw until they have to.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we've got Stone by Day, of course. If you have 3 or more cards in your hand, you can't ready. So there's a lot going on here.
Yeah. It's a lot to think about, and I think the most important thing, just to remind people, is it's at the end of each player's turn. So basically, if you play this, end your turn, and your opponent has a lot of cards in their hand, sure, you'll get a big advantage of discarding them down. But then the next turn, as long as this remains on the board, then they can kind of dump their hand if they've got the 2 card. Well, they'll draw up to 3, dump their hand, draw back up to 2, and then this card, while it was an advantage for you, then becomes a disadvantage for you straight after. So really funky card to play around with. I think myself and Thiago said it could maybe fit into a weird like blue steel list maybe. But yeah, curious again to hear your thoughts on this, Thiago.
Yeah, so in something like Blue Steel, where you're playing the ramp effects early, you're able to like thin your hand size down to benefit off of the drawing cards ability. Basically, this whole wall of text means at the end of each player's turn, they go until they have 2 cards in hand.
Yes.
So you discard down or you drop.
Yeah.
So basically what that's going to entail is you're going to play this on 6, but then your opponent's going to have an entire turn to ink a card, play out as many cards as they want in their hand, and then go down to the 2 cards or drop to 2 cards. So you would think that this would be like a giant advantage against these like bigger strategies, but they have an entire turn to like, after it's already on the board, play into it, and then after the first turn of maybe having to discard a card or 2, now they're going to be able to just like ink the card they draw and then play 2 cards, and then now it's drawing them cards, and their cards are probably more powerful at the end of the game. So it's going to be a really interesting card to see where exactly this lands and what type of shell you want this in. I don't think we have like enough information to really make a full assessment, but I like when they make legendaries that like have these cool big game breaking effects, and so yeah, if anything, at least it's that.
It feels like a legendary card for sure, which it should.
Exactly,
Many legendary cards fall short in that regard, unfortunately. All right, Zach, I'll let you take Finnick here. Talk to us about this. Yep.
So it looks like a cloud kicker at home to me.
Yep.
When you play this character, you can pay 2 to return a 2 or less. Yeah, so I think it could definitely find its role. It just came in and out of decks throughout its lifespan. So sometimes it was really, really, really good, and sometimes it wasn't even played at all. So we'll see with the context of the rest of the format how this one does. but it's looking that stats are going to be quite broken, so this might not be so good.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Looking at the card beside it, it's stats are really matter. I made a tweet yesterday after we spoke about the cards and basically stuck Thiago's face beside all of these overstated cards, where he had a big grin on his face, like, please put 4 of these in my deck now. So yeah, I mean, Thiago, you can talk to us a little bit about these overstated cards. It'll probably be good to talk about it in general, because by the time we get to talk about the other ones, we don't have to repeat ourselves, essentially.
Yeah, so it looks like a giant theme is going to be just making these overstated cards. They're really trying to shift like what the base stat lines are. And so we're going to be seeing, like, we've seen a 2-mana 3/3 inkable that quest for 1. So like when we compare that to cards like Raja that I'm literally playing in my deck right now, these cards like completely overperform them. I think it's going to cause a major shift in like the way that these decks are built, because right now, like, some of the best cards in the game are cards like Calhoun, which if every single deck has like access to 2-cost 3/3 inkable, like the steel card that we've already been spoiled, then these kind of effects like Calhoun, which you're paying a premium to have the uninkable slot in your deck, just because she's like a giant pile of stats, become way less of a priority. So I think like we've already seen a ton of these cards, and like obviously the power level is going up a ton, but like it looks somewhat vanilla. Like we're not seeing like these super intricate effects and whatnot. Like of course, some decks are going to be able to do powerful things, but like at least in these gargoyle decks, like people are just going to be playing these piles of stats and curving out, and it's going to make us like reassess the kind of stat bodies that we're playing right now. So the decks might involve like a ton of new cards, but I don't know if they're going to end up playing like super differently, because like they're just still these like curve piles that like are just trying to play a bunch of stats on curve and create these advantages on boards with profitable trades. So I mean, this card that we're looking at right now, Lexington, is absolutely one of my favorites. It is able to attack all of the important evasive characters in the game right now. It'd be interesting to see if a card like this helps the steel decks into decks like Blurple, which can be very tricky for them just because their Genie into Elsa curves are much worse when you have a 4 attack character. So the Stone by Day ability, I don't know how much it's going to matter. I think in the cheaper the character is, the more full your hand's going to be, so it might end up mattering a bit more in that sense, but it's going to be really interesting to see if there's like payoffs for having these cards in your deck, which we've like only seen a couple, or if people are just going to like be playing 20 vanilla characters in their deck.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a super spicy meta. It's either, it's just curved decks that have higher statted bodies, or there'll be the decks that don't care about the stats as much but are just trying to do the broken things. But overall, this set seems more of just power creep in terms of stats rather than power creep in terms of straight like effects and abilities, which I kind of like. So the Bagheera, it's the same type of thing. It's a 3-cost sinkable 4/4 with an Amber. It's also an ally. You can do Bagheera into Bianca. You can do that Lexington into Bianca. And then we've got Malicious, Mean, and Scary. So this card is part of this like new 3-card combo with the 3-cost Prince Philip, the warded one, where you can have the Philip, you can sing Malicious, Mean, and Scary, and then shift the 9-cost Prince Philip onto it and basically clear your opponent's entire board. So reminding a lot of people of the 8-cost Sisu shift line, in terms of the fact that by the end of, if you're able to clear your opponent's board, you're left with like this big pile of stats that Alice is questing for the 3. But in Prince Philip's case, it's also an evasive. It's a 6/6. It's a really big card, and I think when we looked into this a bit deeper, Thiago, we were basically saying what makes this combo so powerful is how uninteractable it is, because that Prince Philip has ward, so you can really just set up for that and then pop off, clear your opponent's entire board. You can do the setup where you go ramp on 2, sail on turn 3 into ink into Prince Philip. Then the next turn you can ink to 6, do your Prince Philip combo, and clear the entire board. So, just seems pretty powerful. I know a lot of people have also been memeing saying, this is a 3-card combo. Where's my B prep? I just want my one card that clears the board. But I think as 3-card combos go, you're left like leaving yourself with this massive body is pretty good. I'd be surprised if this combo isn't seen within at least some type of Emerald decks. Like, how does that sound on first impressions to you, Zach? Like, is it think people are getting a bit too excited about it, or do you think it is indeed like quite uninteractable and like there could be something there?
It's really hard to say without the context of the rest of the format.
Yeah.
I mean, we can look back to like grab your swords doing 2 damage, and this is grab your knives because it only does 1 damage.
Yeah.
But it's inkable, so I think
Yes.
I think it has some potential for sure. We just have to wait and see the context, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think as you said, I think I'd be shocked if it doesn't end up seeing play in some sort of archetype. I think particularly if the context of the meta is going to be a lot of these like big curve out decks where they have just like these overstated cards and those become some of the more prevalent cards in the meta. I think those decks typically tend to struggle against decks that kind of hit you on this unfair axis, and I think those decks don't have a ton of answers to just giant 6/6 evasives that quest for 3 on turn 4. Like, part of the problem of why Sisu is so oppressive is that after you ran out of all your resources, you don't have time to like build back up, and because she just clocks you so quickly because she quests for 3. And so having evasive on top of that, so that like in that format we could have attacked Sisu with Fox, and even still it was super oppressive. So yeah, I'd be shocked if we don't see a very strong green deck that utilizes this combo.
Also, if the decks are just going to be big positive stats, this is like so good against it. I don't care how big your dudes are. I'll just like
Yeah, exactly.
literally clear your board, and I don't
Yep.
care about your stats.
100%.
Yeah.
Completely agree. But
next, all right, yeah, people don't have to listen to the embarrassment of me misunderstanding Swooping Strike. But yeah, Thiago,
I thought you were cooking.
Yeah, no, you're a big fan of this card, right?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good, especially in like the purple steel shells that people have now, where they're playing cards like Captain Hook and Rafiki and Calhoun, like being able to play this, and your opponent will typically just have to exert their weakest character, so like a Tipo or something, and then being able to attack it with a Calhoun and gaining a bunch of floor and kind of thinning out their board, ruining their like singer count, stuff like that is going to be super good. I think it's obviously they're looking for ways to help us deal with things like Ward. So we're not stuck in a meta where people are playing Prince Johns and Muses and just sitting them back and able to use their abilities all day. I think that if we do see blue-green decks using the Prince Philip combo, they'll likely play Tipo, or like maybe they'll still play the Clarabelle shift line and little like Bobby Zimmerowski or whatever. So it's not like 100% gonna deal with the Prince Philip, and you're gonna need other answers to deal with their other character before casting something like this. But I'm just happy that they're giving us these kind of tools, because it's really frustrating to just play against Prince John for multiple years and then it's just sitting there with its static ability. So it's also important that this card's inkable. This card's going to be bad sometimes. So yeah, just glad that something like this exists.
Yeah, and Francine again is the same. It's just basically another 3-cost inkable 4/4, except it just has resist 1 instead, which is actually notable because the Bell can still take this out, whereas Bell can't take it a 4/4.
Yeah, so usually a health is always worse than a resist, but specifically going from 3 to 4, it makes a big difference. Like something like Calhoun going from 3 health down to 2 health to get the resist doesn't really matter that much because they can get taken out by Bell either way. But 3 to 4 is a somewhat significant difference. But I mean, if Purple Steel is still similar to how it is now, like I would 100% be playing 4 copies of this deck if this was legal in the current meta.
Then we've got your favorite 2-cost inkable 3/3 that we already kind of talked about. I wanted to include Mushu's Rocket because Ruby's really been not doing very well lately, and I think this is one item that's particularly strong. When it comes into play, you can give something rush, and then you can pay 2 a little bit later to give another character rush. So as cheap items go for kind of recursion, it's honestly not too bad. But it doesn't. Like, Ruby needs something else, right? This is a slight step in the right direction, but I think Ruby just needs to be paired with a good, consistent card draw engine, good, consistent statted cards, right? It just needs to draw cards as well, and that's why it was so good with Red-Blue back in the day with Hiram and stuff, because you had all of your control elements from it as well. So, yeah, I think it's a cool item, but I don't want to speak upon it too much because it's, I don't think it's worth talking about too much if Ruby overall is still not going to be so powerful, which, at least from the cards that we've seen so far, is not really the case. And then, to finish it out on this last Ruby card, this is Tinkerbell, Fancy Footwork. So, just 1-cost inkable 3/1 that quests for 1. this is a strict upgrade from cards we've previously seen printed, like Toby. Toby was a uninkable 3/1 that quested for 1. And I kind of like this card. I know, like, Zach, I'd like to hear your thoughts on, like, just this 3/1 stat line, because to me it seems pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's solid. I've considered playing stuff like Toby or Felicia in the past, so like having an actual good version of it's cool to have. I think like the main thing is that it's another shift target. Like it's a really good shift target for Tinkerbell. But yeah, it's just a vanilla, and I like having access to it.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing the prevalence of cards like Captain Hook and Rafiki and Royal Guard in this meta, and so Tinkerbell plays a very similar role to those cards, just being able to sit there, and then when your opponent exerts their characters to quest, being able to trade. Typically, you can even trade into their 2 and 3 cost characters and create a bit of an ink advantage there. So these characters have been proven to be super strong. I think Zach's point about shift lines is very spot on. We know that the giant fairy Tinkerbell is like super strong, and we've already seen like a red Tinkerbell be spoiled in this set already, so it's an important thing to keep your eye on. I think different from a card like Captain Hook or Rafiki is that this Tinkerbell can actually quest sometimes and then cracks back for 3, so then when they challenge it with their 2 or 3 cost character, you are able to also take them down, whereas a card like Captain Hook can pretty much never quest because he just gets taken out by the opposing character and doesn't do enough to take them out as well. So there's a little bit more flexibility there with allowing you to quest if that's what the game demands.
For sure. Yeah, well, that's basically all of the cards that we have to go through. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me in this episode. Yeah, looking forward to seeing everybody in Milwaukee. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you guys enjoyed it, the number thing you can do is leave us a review over on Apple Podcast, Spotify, your local podcast platform. There's a video version of this podcast available over on youtube.com/@PodcanaPodcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there. Twitters are at Kawatech_CG, at Zach Bivens1, at Thiago XS. I'm realizing on the overlay, your Twitter handle, Thiago, is Kim's Twitter handle. So yeah, if you want to see Thiago's content, be sure to go over. Go follow Kim. Be sure to check out Thiago's Metafy down below in the description. Sky's Metafy. Check out Zach on Twitter. Zach, I don't think you have a Metafy at the moment.
Don't.
You don't. Okay, cool. No worries. Yeah, looking forward to seeing everybody in Milwaukee. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.